But let's say we do have a correction. All of a sudden, everything drops like 20, 30%. Well, if all your money is sitting in stocks and everything else, and all of a sudden that's down 30%, you're not going to want to sell that, right? You're not going to sell some of those shares or cash out some money. But now if you have something like this where you're building up insurance, your money's not down. So while everyone else is down, now the opportunities come up. You can pull the cash out. And the advantage with the insurance is we can actually do lending against the policies.
Welcome to Real Talk with Gary. If you are listening to this show, that means you are either searching or ready to make a financial change in your life. This show is not only about real estate investing, but also the importance of mindset and the roadmap to a better, healthier life. Learn the daily routines of successful entrepreneurs and the latest market strategies and trends to stay ahead of the curve. Ready for some down-to-earth, north-of-the-border Canadian talk? Here's your host, Gary Hibbert.
All right, welcome back. And today I've got Johnathan Pollock. He's a really good friend of mine. He specializes in personalized financial planning and building wealth for his clients. He not only works with investors, but he also works with business owners. He's also been self-employed for the last 15 years. And the reason I wanted to have him on the show today was back in around, I believe it was 2015, 2016, somewhere around there, I helped him purchase his first property. But what we did was we used a strategy called house hacking. He's now on to his second property, and he's now finally looking for his dream home. But what we did was we set it up in a way so that he now has two great properties for his kids. He's got some retirement set up using real estate. And so we dive into what is house hacking? How does it work? How can people break into the market, especially with everything happening today? We also dive into some of the challenges that he experienced in the beginning, the power of leverage, the importance of being obsessed. And if you guys, well, I know Johnathan very well. He is obsessed and he's a hard worker. And we dive into some of his mindset and what he does to lead the life that he lives today, why paying for coaching is so important. And we also dive into infinite banking. Now, this is not for everybody, but if it's something that interests you, we do touch on that. He's very knowledgeable when it comes to that space. Now, before we dive into today's show, I did want to leave you guys with some advice, and I kind of take a look back on some of the advice that I've received over the years, and what's the best advice I got, and what's the worst advice I got. So the best one that I've ever got, one of the best ones, is invest in real estate. All right, now obviously there's lots of other ones, but that's one of the ones. One of the worst financial advice that I ever received was save your money. And so I say that because there's a lot of fear right now in the marketplace. Be careful of the mainstream media. Be careful of the fear that they are pushing, but do still be alert. Still be aware of what's happening. But I can tell you this, when I'm looking in the market right now, the fear that I'm seeing, it also opens up opportunities. And if you know how to find opportunities, if you know how to look for them, and if you're going out with experienced real estate agents like myself or Chris or Quentin, we can help guide you down that path. All right. And don't forget, I am now also over on YouTube. So if you like to watch the podcast, you can watch it over there. If you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget, please kind of leave a review. It definitely helps other people find the show. And with that, sit back, relax, and I will talk to you guys next week. Take care. Are you a landlord or tenant in need of legal assistance? Mayfair Law Group has got you covered. Our experienced team specializes in landlord and tenant board services, providing expert guidance and representation for all your landlord or tenant legal needs. Contact us today at 416-546-1581 and let us help you navigate the complexities of landlord and tenant laws. Johnathan, we're live. How you doing, brother?
I'm glad you didn't tell me beforehand that it was going to be on video. Otherwise, maybe when I've been here.
It's all good, man. No, it's all good. Great. We're going to have some fun with this.
Honestly, it's one of those things that you kind of always have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. So yeah. I'm glad.
But you know what, though? You're a handsome looking guy. You're gonna show up well on YouTube. Don't worry.
Well, I appreciate you lying to me.
So listen, let's kind of, actually, you know what? Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for having a
Thanks
shot
for having me.
Glenfiddich with me.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So let's talk about your life. Let's talk about your story. So here's what I want to do. I want to talk about your story. Then I want to get into some house hacking. I want to talk about the pros and the cons of house hacking. Then I also want to talk on like some of the renovations that you end up having to do in some of these properties. We'll dive into a little bit of, can we say infinite banking?
Sure.
Okay, infinite banking, and then some mindset stuff.
Sounds
All right.
good.
All right. So tell everybody who you are, what you do, and your story.
Awesome. So Johnathan Pollock, I'm part owner of Thompson and Pollock Wealth. We are a wealth management firm that specializes in investments and insurance, predominantly for business owners. So I got in the industry about 11 years ago. The really interesting thing is like, there's a lot of importance behind the name where we came up with this Thompson and Pollock, because it was actually my parents' friend that I had seen over the years, and I always saw he was like really happy in what he did, and I kind of bugged him for years about what he did. Yeah. And so eventually he got me into the industry. So he got me in about 11 years ago, and I basically harassed him every single year, with the intention that one day if he ever wanted to retire, to give me the opportunity to take over for him. And lo and behold, things just kind of came to fruition, everything lined up. And so as of June of last year, we went out and started our own firm. The reason I'm saying that, the crazy thing is, like, I'm always a big believer in everything happens in life for a reason. Like the last couple of years have been just, crazy for everyone. And then we went through a lot with my mom being sick with cancer, and like my mom and I were like
best friends.
Yeah. He used to talk to her every morning. The crazy thing is though, so Bob, my business partner, friends with my folks, his last name is Thompson, mine's Pollock. Uh-huh. And the reason why I chose that name, and I said to Bob, I said, honestly, like my one wish is, out of everything, are you okay if we call it Thompson Pollock? And the crazy thing about this is my mom's maiden name is Thompson.
Oh, that's crazy.
So for like, and all this kind of transpired of like us starting this firm and everything else shortly after all this happened. So in a way, I kind of feel like, it's like her kind of looking over me. And for me, it gives me drive because I want to be able to create something amazing and have like a way for her, like memory to kind of live on.
Yeah. And you know what? And you have, you're probably one of the hardest working guys that I know. And especially at the age when we first met. How old were you when we met? You were what? Early 20s.
Yeah, probably.
You were early 20s, but you just had this hunger and this fire in you. And I'm like, I remember telling Darren, like, man, this guy's going to do some big things. And you have. You've done some incredible things.
I appreciate it.
And I know that it hasn't always been an easy road. And that's why I wanted to have you in here today to talk about, I think one of the biggest challenges for a lot of people today, and even back when you bought your first home, mm-hmm. It was expensive at that time as well. You look back at it now, it's cheap.
Yeah.
Every time you buy a property, it's always expensive. It was 2010, 2012, 2016. Every year homes are too expensive, but they just seem to always kind of keep going up. Obviously, except for, 2017 and obviously last year.
Yeah.
But let's talk about your journey getting into your first investment property. And you obviously did a house hack. And for people who are listening who may not know what a house hack is, let's kind of dive into that, mm-hmm. because there was obviously some things that went well, things that did not go well, how you overcame them. Let's really kind of break that story down.
Yeah. First of all, I appreciate you saying that. I really do. It's really interesting. I was always intrigued by real estate, and like being in finance, like I'm very true to my values in that it's all about balance, right? It's about building up different asset classes and everything else. And that's why I love real estate. And the thing was though, you learn a lot. Like it's all a learning experience. Like you have to kind of go through this, and you have to have these crazy moments where you're like, what the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? Because those are all experiences. You have to take them the right way and learn from it. And like, I know even when I first started, we could barely even afford our house. Cause at that point I was investing everything I had into like growing this business and everything else. And like you said, it's like, I remember we bought our first place for $342. And I was thinking like, this is way too much. I don't want to spend this much.
Was that what it was? It was $340.
Yeah.
So wild.
And I remember I said the same thing about the second house.
And this was in Oshawa.
Yeah.
This is in Oshawa.
Yeah.
Right. And what year was this?
So that was in 2015.
Okay.
Yeah. And so like my wife was working, she has an amazing job. She's a nurse. So she has that stability. I was a business owner. So we kind of balanced well that way.
Yeah.
But being self-employed, it makes it even more tricky to get approved for mortgages, right?
Yes.
So that was kind of our variable. So we were kind of limited at that point, and a lot of my assets were tied up. And so we basically bought our first house. Yep. And then every single night when I came home from work until like 11, 12 at night, and then all day Saturday, I mean, from like 6 a.m. till 6 or 7 at night, and the same thing on Sunday, we worked on the basement. And like, we didn't have the money at the time to pay other people to do it. And I kind of wanted to be involved in it. So I just taught myself, and it just like, there's so much resources out there. Like, you can spend time doing it. Don't recommend doing it now. But that was an experience. So I spent all this time doing the renovations because it was the only way we could afford to kind of get to that next step. And it was a lot of work. And then we finished the basement. And
so let's kind of walk through that though. So you legalized it. Mm-hmm. What was that process like working with the city? Because there was obviously some issues with height in the basement.
Yeah.
Right. Duct work. Right. So let's walk through that.
For sure. Yeah. There's always going to be barriers. And especially when you deal with different municipalities, they're all different. Right. And you know that.
Yeah.
So there's the whole process of like getting the permits, and then you submit the drawings, and then they decline them, and then you come back and you're not really sure what it is.
Did you do the drawings yourself as well? Or did you hire PCIN?
I hired somebody. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of headache along the way, but it's one of those things where like, it all depends on who your team is, right? Like, you helped me purchase that first property. You had all the experience as far as like what to be an investor. So there was a lot of guidance there that I got from you, which I appreciate very much. But yeah, getting the permit process was a lot harder than I expected. Like, you run into issues. And I remember when we were going through our basement, we invested like all this money. And I probably did things maybe a little nicer than I had to, because I can be a little anal, but I wanted to have it like nicer and go after a nice clientele.
And you were also going to move into the basement. I think, did you
we
do
did.
That? Okay, yeah. Right.
We did. So we did the renovation. We moved into the basement because we had actually saved more money. But the issue we had, like, we thought we were all done, and we invested all this money. We're like, oh, this is great. We checked all the boxes, and the inspector comes in and he's like, yeah, you're off by like 1/8. I think it was 1/8 or 1/16 of an inch for ceiling height. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I don't know what.
And that was just at the ductwork.
It was like, there was two spots in the house where one of the main beams went across, and there was only 2 spots of the house where you had a little narrow walkway where you'd walk through that spot. And so I'm like, what the hell are we going to do? Like, and just had to get creative, right? And I just tried everything I could to figure it out. And we ended up having to shave like a little bit of the floor, and they said that was fine. So we got it to work that way. But it definitely wasn't easy. And then so we moved to the basement.
Yeah.
Because we looked at it like, okay, well, the basement's nice.
And so when you shaved the floor, who came with that idea? Was it the inspector, or was that you? Because sometimes he gives you tips and ideas.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. I think it actually was the inspector. Yeah,
right.
That's a really good point, because I think that's one thing I do is like, I'm not afraid to like put myself out there and ask other people. Mm-hmm. Like, they have that joke where like, men are afraid to ask for directions. Yeah. I'm like the opposite, right? It's like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. The answers are out there. Just find people that are smarter than you and know what to do, and then duplicate it.
100%.
Absolutely.
That's exactly how I am as well too. And I think a lot of times you're right that, people are scared to ask questions or to look dumb because they don't know the answers, or they don't want to, just ask. And there's so many people out there that are willing to share that information with you. Yeah. Right? Like, don't try and figure this out on your own.
Yeah. But it's true. That's a good point. And I think that there's probably multiple reasons for it. There's probably a part of it.
To that,
sorry. There's multiple reasons for that.
Yeah.
There's probably a part of it where as man, we're stubborn. But the other thing I think too is like, as a new investor, like, I know myself, you kind of feel like, well, why are these people going to share information? Right. But I think it's amazing. Like, one thing I figured out is I met some amazing people along the way, and like super, super successful people. Most of the times people are nice. Like, if you're a good person and you show compassion and you don't waste their time, a lot of times people generally want to help you. Like, I feel like generally people are good. Like, yeah, there's some nasty people out there, but just put yourself out there, be vulnerable, ask questions. Like, I'm never afraid to constantly like, I don't know how that works. Like, explain to how it works, right? Or how did you do it? What kind of struggle did you go through?
Right. And especially when you're asking those questions to the city, they've seen lots of things that don't work and that do work. So why not just ask them?
Yeah.
And I think so many people are fearful of actually just going through the city. Just ask. And a lot of times I've found, like, even like now, like when we do a lot of the webinars, like we're bringing the city on, because we want our investors to be doing this the legal way. Absolutely. Especially when you're dealing with a family and now you're dealing with somebody else's life. Just make sure it's legit. Why not? Like, why cut the corners?
I agree with you. And I see everything, right? Because the clients we deal with, all different scenarios. And, you hear it a lot. People are like, oh, well, I didn't do it permits, or I didn't do it this way because they're difficult to deal with. And I'm like, yeah, it can be a pain for sure. But there is a reason behind it. Like, I mean, you don't necessarily have to agree with all of it, but like you said, it's people's safety. And the other thing is like, you have to look at, like, this is investment, right? You want to protect your investment. Make sure you do it properly, spend the extra time, do the homework. You know what I mean? And it pays off dividends in the long term. Because my biggest fear was, let's say I didn't do it correctly, and all of a sudden I have this property I think is amazing, and then 10 years down the road I have some kind of issue, or God forbid some kind of, a tenant gets injured or something. I don't want that headache, right? And I also don't want to put someone else in that position.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing as well too is that when it's legal, it adds at least another 10 to 15% on the value of your home, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, it also helps with financing when you're looking to purchase another property, because now you can use both of those incomes. And I think a lot of people forget that piece.
That was huge, because that was advice that you gave me. I remember we had that conversation, because I'm always trying to like weigh all my options. And I remember we were talking about that, and you were like a big advocate, like, you know what, go through the process. Yeah, it's a little tedious, and yeah, it can be a pain, but do the permits. And that was huge, because I remember you said, like, you were kind of like, oh, well, at the time, you'll probably end up getting like $30,000, $40,000 more in value just for it being legal. And then sure enough, like as soon as I got that paper, it was literally like $50,000 more that it was worth.
Yeah.
Like,
right. And that allowed you and helped you to be able to buy that second property.
Absolutely.
What were some of the other challenges that you faced? So you had the height in the basement.
Yeah.
What about outside? Were there any challenges there with the driveway? Because that's another issue as well too sometimes.
Yeah, we had an issue with the driveway. So, and it's funny because like, I mean, me being a planner, like, you try to map out every kind of option and look at every kind of variable. And I thought I covered my bases pretty well. But no, we ended up having an issue where the driveway, they initially said that the parking would be fine, and then there was some kind of nuance where it wasn't. And so we ended up having to get creative. I had to like talk to neighbors, and then I was talking to the city, and I was looking at all my options, and we ended up having to cut in like and extending the driveway. But we found a solution. Mm-hmm. I think at the end of the day, it's like when I look back on it, it's like, and I believe this for anything. Anything is possible. You just have to want it bad enough and just don't give up. Yeah. Like every time you fail, it's not a no. It's just, right. Wasn't the right answer right now, right?
And people are listening right now, probably saying, "Gary, like you put this guy in this property with all these different issues." I think that the conversation was, yes, there's some tricky pieces here, but it'll work.
No, because when we looked at it, like we did the analysis on it, it's just you're never going to know everything, right? Because the house is like, I look back at it now, I'm like, it's probably one of the best decisions we made. Like, I'm so happy we did all that, but you're going to have hiccups no matter what. Like, even with clients, I can plan all of these things and set up all these plans, but life is still going to throw you a curveball. The difference is, I think it comes down to all time is mentality.
Right.
Like,
and now look at what you've added to your tool belt, new additional skills, right? On how to convert a single family into a 2-unit.
Yeah.
And you've got it an asset. And we knew that it wasn't going to be a home that you're going to stay in forever.
Yeah.
Right. And so then what happens next now? So is it 2019?
Yeah, probably around there. I may be off a bit on my dates, but probably around there. And then we basically refinanced, pulled that money out, used that to buy another house, and then did the same thing. And we're just going to keep repeating that process. And that's why, like, I think, usually it's the hardest part is the first house.
Yeah, right.
It's that first leap, right? And I know I even have this conversation with like younger clients a lot. And I'm like, don't shoot yourself in the foot by trying to wait to save up this like perfect down deposit, whatever it is, or this perfect house or whatever that idea you think of what that is. It's like, just get in. Because even if it's a house you don't like at all, just get into the market, because regardless of what happens, if the market takes off or whatever, you still have that equity. You can still sell that house and then transition to the next one. But I've seen people where they're holding off on a house. Let's say they have $50,000 for a deposit, and they're like, oh, I want to save 100, or I want to have enough to get the 20%. And then all of a sudden they saved it. Amazing job. They saved for the next year and a half. They saved up like $50,000. I'm like, that's amazing. But now the house is 100,000 more.
Right.
Right. So
and that market is outpacing what they can save.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people miss that part.
Huge.
And they don't really understand inflation. And I think only for the first time, many people understood really what inflation was. Like for me, I understood it back in 2008. I'm not saying I'm any kind of a guru, but I did a very simple math. to saying the raise I got at work the previous year was $1,000 based on the income that I was making. It worked out to like 1.3 something or 1.4%, and inflation was chugging away at 2%. Not much, but it was enough for me to know, oh, I get it. I cannot get ahead by having a job. And the only way to outpace this inflation is by owning real estate. And it's more about owning the land. That's really where the value is, right? Because God's not making any more land.
They're not making more of it. They're also not making more waterfront properties.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the math doesn't math. That's for sure.
So then you reach out to me, we go and you're like, Gary, we need to go buy another property. This is not going to be our forever home.
Yeah.
Let's find another house hack.
Yeah. So we did the same thing. We bought another bungalow and kind of close because I wanted to have it easy enough to manage and everything else, the business and kids. And so we did that, did the same idea, and then we renovated. But this time, again, it's all learning experience. All those stuff I went through, as opposed to me being like angry, like, oh, this sucked and this happened. It's like, great, this is learning experience. I'm only better now coming into it. So,
and what was the price of that one?
510. 510. Even then I was like,
right.
I do not want to spend the kind of money. I look back now, I'm like, okay, it's a big difference of what, But,
and we also knew there was going to be challenges with this one as well.
Oh, for sure.
Right. Because we knew there was a driveway issue and, right. But we were like, we can make it work, but it's not simple.
Right. Right. I that's a really good point too, right? Like I think it comes down to anything. Anytime you do investment, you have to do your homework and do your due diligence. Because I think that the people that get into trouble with real estate are ones that don't do their homework, right? They just think, oh, I'm gonna buy a property. It's passive. I'm gonna make all this money. Yeah, you can make tons of money. Absolutely. Not fully passive, but if you know that going into the right expectations and you have the right things in place, you can do very well, right?
Yeah.
The big thing is just surrounding yourself with the right people. Like I'm big on, I don't pretend to be the smartest person in the world by any means. The difference is that I know what I'm good at, and then I find people that are the best at whatever I need done and hire them.
It's a team.
Like
is who you spend your most of your time with, right? And I think that's what you figured out very early in life. Was that because of your dad and your mom?
I think I was very lucky that way. Like I grew up where my dad and all my uncles are all business owners. So like that was my world. Like that was my normal, right? Whereas like the thought of me working a 9 to 5 just makes me sick to my stomach.
Your dad was an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, he's a great guy. But sorry, just diving back into that property. Okay, so we had challenges with the driveway.
Yep.
And I think there were some challenges inside the home as well, too.
Yeah.
Okay, let's walk through all this.
Yeah. The house, so we did a bunch of renovations. We had to end up pulling out quite a bit of electrical. And again, those are things you're not going to know until you really start to dig into things and get to the weeds of it. So we had a bunch of issues with electrical, and it's funny now, I can laugh about it, but it's a little traumatizing then. At the time, we were going through this right now, and then like we just moved, and Laura was like at the point she was ready to pop with our first, right?
Ready to pop.
So
I don't know if I should edit that out or not, but
you're not allowed to say that.
No, you can, I guess. Go ahead, Red. It's your wife.
So like that's challenging enough already. She was still working full time at the hospital, and this is during COVID. So it's just craziness, everything. And we had hired this guy to come in and put an entrance in our house. And the guy's like, oh yeah, I can do it. No problem. This is what it's going to take. We're like, perfect. We're going to pay someone. We don't have to do the hassle. Guy comes in, and by like second day, like there was like barely anything done, and we're like, what's going on here? And then he ends up cutting the hole out before he finished actually cutting outside, and then basically took off the next day and never came back. So this is the middle of winter. This guy cuts a hole in our house in the basement, doesn't dig the hole properly. All of a sudden, water starts pouring in.
No way.
Yeah. And so like, and Laura's managing her schedule and everything else and mine. And so we had to go out and like purchase a bunch of these sump pumps. And so I'm sticking sump pumps right outside of the hole, and I'm running it and hooking a hose up and having it go right to the sink. And I'm setting up multiple, and that's to set an alarm. So every 2 hours I have to wake up to check the sump pump so it doesn't freeze, and like warm it, put hot water over it just so the house didn't leak. And then literally the next week we had a leak at our first house, the first rental, at the same time. And we had to basically like tear out a bunch of the house. And
right.
Yeah.
So where are things right now then with the property that you're at?
So everything's done. Now we're looking at, we're like finally looking at our family house now.
Right.
So we're just kind of.
So now you've got 2 investment properties by using the house hack strategy.
Yep.
The first property, is it cash flowing?
Very much so. Both of them will be. So right now we're only renting the first one, which is 2 units. So it's a duplex. Cash flowing very well. Like we try to really not to pull out a crazy amount out of it because I want to save that to maybe in the future to buy another property. So that's cash flowing probably about $800 a month.
Right.
Which is great.
Now, did you lock in?
Yeah. Okay. And which is interesting because I've never locked in because like statistically speaking, you come out better ahead doing variable, but this is the first time I've ever locked in both our mortgages. And we did that about like 7 months ago. So our timing was very good.
Right. Yeah.
Just because I anticipated this coming.
Right. Yeah. And I remember us having that talk about it as well too, right? I always enjoyed our conversations. Me too. Our conversations always seem to be like when we're driving. Yeah,
exactly. And I could go for like a year without talking to you, and then I'll just pick up the phone, and then we're caught on the phone for like an hour, like, okay, I gotta go.
Yeah. Because we're always talking about, world affairs, what's happening, and interest rates, and Kenny's home keeps going the way they're going.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So you got 2 house hacks, which is awesome. And now you're looking for your dream home.
Yeah.
Are you looking to go further out east? What's kind of the game plan?
Yeah. Like I know our next place would definitely be east a little bit, just because of like, I want to have property. That's kind of always been my dream. And we have offices in Oshawa and one in Belleville. So if I could kind of put ourselves, like if we could be in like Newcastle, Cobourg, it'd be perfect. And I want to have like at least 5 acres or so.
Nice. Are you looking to do that sometime this year, next year?
I'm not sure. I'm saving up right now. Like I think personally, I think the market's going to correct. I personally think we're going to have, I think the worst hasn't come yet, and not to be like a doom or gloom by any means.
Well, you're a realist.
Yeah. And I read a lot, and like, I try to look at like every different perspective. And it looks a lot like a repeat of what happened in the 80s, where the government, printed all this money. People thought money was cheap, had over exuberance. All of a sudden the government's like, we screwed up. And all of a sudden they start lowering interest rates really quickly to try to fix their problem. The problem is too many people went out and spent money on stuff they shouldn't have and everything else, and racked up debt, and their payments are doubling, cost of living's more. So I think we're due for a reset. But the thing is,
and I want to timestamp this. So we're about close to the end of May. So just so when we release this, people know when we're talking about this stuff.
And I very well could be wrong. I mean, I don't have a glass ball.
That's fine.
Otherwise, we'd be having this in my office.
A lot of times we're wrong, right? But we're throwing our opinions out and what we believe. But continue, because I think I know where you're going with it, and I think you're right.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where, because I'll talk to clients and I'll kind of chuckle about it. And I've been telling my clients for the last 2 years that we're going to have a correction in the stock market for sure, right? And I thought real estate as well. And so other people are like, what are you going to do? And they panic. I'm like, no, if you actually look at people that are doing big things, people that are making lots of money, people that are building stuff, they look at it completely differently. Like for me, I'm kind of excited, not because I never want anything bad to happen to anyone else by any means, but I look at it from a standpoint of like opportunity. When this happens, these kind of market corrections, which are normal, it's like almost every 10 years the market corrects. We're just overdue because the government delayed it by printing money. So the market corrects, that's your biggest opportunity. When the market resets, it's like walking into a store when everything else is on clearance. When everyone else is panicking, you're like, what are you doing? Like, just buy as much as you can and just sit and wait, and the market will pick back up.
Right. Yeah. And look, you know what? I think the thing that you always have to keep in mind is, and I think this is what got a lot of people caught, is the short-term view, where you really should be looking at where are things going to be 10 years from now. So whether we're right or we're wrong in this conversation, if it's going to crash, it's going to come down, there's going to be a correction. You always have to look at that long-term view of where are things going to be down the road, because you don't make the wealth in real estate in that short gain. You get it in the purchase, yes, but you get it in that long-term play as well too.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. And then to further that, the big thing is that works both ways, because just because we're holding off right now because that's our strategy does not mean that's the right thing for everyone. So example of that is like, I'll see people that are like, we don't want to buy a house right now. It's like, why? Well, because the market might crash. Okay, well, what's your situation? They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, if you're buying a family house and you find that house that you love and you can afford it, it means nothing if the market's going to crash next year. If you're going to own that house for 20 years, it literally means nothing.
Right. I was listening to this podcast.
You have to do it.
Patrick Bet-David, and he had a guest on there, and they were talking about the home that he lives in Florida. And in the 1930s, that home was worth about $100,000. Today, that home is worth $42 million. And he's like, even in a strong country, the devaluing of the dollar, how it erodes your savings. And the worst place to keep your money is in the bank. Mm-hmm. And he's like, you have to deploy your money. Do not keep it in the bank. He was more of like a Bitcoin advocate, but really he was also saying, put it into some form of asset.
Yep.
Right? Because the way they're printing money, the way they're devaluing money, the way inflation is going, the last place you want to keep it is in the bank. And that's really been kind of my message for a lot of people is like, don't save. Savers are losers. Unfortunately, yeah, I know it sounds bad, but that's the truth. And so if you're not deploying your money and putting into assets or something where you can outpace inflation, you're gonna lose.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's very true. It drives me crazy how the banks don't explain that to people. Like when you set up a GIC, like they should have to explain, okay, we're gonna give you a great deal on a GIC. You're like, okay, this is great. She takes care of us because we've dealt with them forever. So you go to the bank and they all of a sudden they set you up like a GIC at 4%. They're like, oh, we're going to give you a great rate, 4%. If they actually explained that inflation is 7%, and that's a whole other thing. I also don't agree with the government. I think they're fudging the numbers personally because there's different ways you can look at it.
Fudging the numbers on inflation.
Yeah.
100%.
Of course they are because they don't want it to look as bad.
It's like
because
a
it shows
bull-faced lie.
Of course, because if you show the true numbers, there's easy ways you can skew that number. You just be very selective in what numbers you use to come up with those figures. But to skew it is great for them because it kind of hides the fact that they screwed up their one job, which is to keep inflation in check. Sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought. I was going to go on a tangent there.
Well, yeah, I think you were talking about the way that
inflation,
inflation, the way they lie, and
thank you. So, like
the numbers.
If most people, because they don't really teach this in school, they're starting to now, which is great. But if they actually taught this in school, most people realize that if inflation's chugging at 7 and they're going to set you up an investment guaranteed at 4, you literally just signed a contract that you're guaranteed to lose 3% per year. Not even factoring in tax. So it's a terrible idea. And
where you think the best place to put your money is then? In real estate is obviously
it depends
one.
on the person. Honestly, yeah. I think diversity is obviously key. Long term, I like real estate and stocks personally.
Okay.
But you got to diversify because it's one of those things where, like, as much as I love real estate, I would never recommend putting all my money in real estate. And as much as I love stocks, I never recommend putting all my money in stocks because both those markets are cyclical, but they're not always cyclical at the same time, which means they go through these cycles, but they don't always happen at the same time. And I don't want to be in a position because I always want to put myself in a position where I'm protected, but I also want to be in a position where I'm in a position of strength. So I want to have it so that when markets do have corrections, instead of panicking like everyone else, I have readily available funds that I can deploy it and take advantage of opportunities. So the reason I'm saying that, let's say I had 20 real estate investment portfolios. Amazing. The 20 properties, all of a sudden real estate's going through a downturn. You're like, wow, now's a great time to scoop up some properties. Well, you can't because all your properties are down. Whereas if you have some assets as well that don't correlate the same way, say you have some assets that are liquid or you have some other assets that don't go down, then you have cash when typically no one else does, and you can scoop up more properties and you're ahead of the other investors that you potentially be competing against.
And that's, I think, a good segue into what you do, which is, well, infinite banking, insurance. Let's dive into that because that's obviously another way to invest your funds so that you're in a more of a liquid position to be able to take action when opportunity presents itself.
I kind of have a different stance on that. I think infinite banking can work really well when it's done correctly. I think you can run into issues sometimes right now because it's started to become a little bit of a buzzword. Like it's been really popular in the States for longer than it has in Canada. It's just starting to kind of really start to take off here.
Why do you think that is? So
I think it's just the more people are starting to find out about it. The problem is like, see, I would say 60% of our business is the investment side and the other 40% is the insurance. And we talk to a lot of wealthy individuals and sometimes some of these concepts are a great fit. And we look at the numbers and we're like, this is a no brainer. But the problem is you got to look at like their standpoint, right? So if the majority of folks are getting their advice from the banks have to fall under the Banking Act of Canada, which means they can only do banking products. It means they're not allowed to offer insurance. Well, the infinite banking concept basically leverages insurance to create liquidity and to build a legacy for the next state because you can, the next generation, because you can transfer wealth tax free. You're like, well, this sounds great. Well, why isn't everyone doing that? Well, if your bank doesn't offer it, they're probably not going to tell you about it, right? So it becomes a little bit of a conflict of interest. And then I think the other thing is too, is it's starting to take off a lot right now. And then you can get some negative press for it as well, because people will then take that as like a blanket statement. Like, and then you have these advisors going out there and telling everyone they should be doing infinite banking, which is not the case. For us, it's not that there's a great product or a solution. It's our job really is to sit down and to really dig in deep. Like what are their deep desires? What are their needs? What are the biggest challenges they're going through? Where do they want to see their business? Where do they want to see their real estate portfolio in the next 5 to 10 years? Then based on that, we then do the homework. And because we own our own company, I don't care what company you go with, what insurance company, bank, whatever, what investment company, we have access to them all. It doesn't matter to me. I then go and do research and I'll put the pieces together of whatever I think is going to serve you best. The problem you can run into is like, so let's say an average person just sets up an infinite banking. It's probably not a good idea. Like it's very specific, because if you're in a certain tax bracket.
And when you say that they're setting up, like they're trying to figure this out on their own, they're sitting down watching like a YouTube video.
Well, I mean, or even like actually just taking out, like setting up a policy. Let's say they talk to an advisor and the person's just like, oh, you want to set this up? And they just go ahead and set it up for them because all they're thinking about is commission, which is wrong. There has to be certain parameters. Like we go through a certain procedure to see if it's the right fit. Like it has to be a different like level of income. Like if you have somebody that's maybe in like kind of that low mid range, it might not make sense. Like you generally want to maximize things like RSPs and TFSAs first, because once you've done that and you're in that certain level where now you've kind of maxed out these options, it then becomes, okay, well, every dollar that I make is taxable, right? And like we're super fortunate in Canada. I think we live in one of the best countries, but one of the trade-off is we also pay some of the highest taxes, right? So we try to find every possible way that's legal and that's fair, that we can, minimize those taxations for our clients. But it's important to kind of be at a certain income level and certain things first to really get the full benefit of it.
Right. So you really need to sit down, take a look at your client's portfolio, what they're doing, what their goals are, and then say, this is how we strategize to get you to where you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
It's not just this is everybody take this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's catered.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, so a lot of the big issues that we're solving and that we find that this actually works really well is we deal with a lot of folks that have businesses. Our specialty is business owners, especially businesses in the trades. It's just kind of the market that I've kind of over the years kind of really developed, because most of my friends and clients that I've known own big trade companies.
Yep.
But any kind of business, really, once you start making good money, you get to the point where you pay yourself a certain amount. So let's say you're paying yourself, $90,000. Let's say you're paying yourself $90,000, whatever the number is, and that is enough to carry your lifestyle. Once you've satisfied your income for your lifestyle, your alternative is, well, I have the money in the corp, and then if I start pulling out more money, I'm just going to pay tax, and no one really wants to give half the money to the government. So the idea is that we can use it to keep the money in the corp, you pay a lower tax rate, and then we can actually set up it's a very specific way, these insurance contracts that we can build the money up inside of there. The reason why you would do that is because the money grows shelter from taxation, because life insurance isn't taxable. The big thing that it really solves for real estate investors is liquidity. Because there's actually two really big things, the liquidity and the estate issue. And
now is this helping most investors that have properties in corporations or even in their own personal name?
It can work both ways. Okay. It works even better for corporations, but I will preface that by saying, don't also be one of those investors that right away thinks that you just need to put your investment properties in your corp. It doesn't always make sense. It can make a lot of sense in the right situations, but again, I think a lot of people see that, I'm going to own all my properties in my corp. Yeah, there's benefits for certain people, but it's not the right thing for everyone. So you can do that concept either personally or you can have it through a corp. I generally find it works better through a corp because there's more tax advantages and there's more ways we can customize it. And you can also separate your liability and create some privacy for your family, which is really important as well.
And this also solves a problem as well too at the end of life.
Yeah.
When you have kids and you have a real estate portfolio, the two things that are certain is death and taxes.
Yeah.
And now you've got taxes that your kids now have to deal with. helps your kids.
Yeah. So what I'll say, sorry, I could talk forever. So I get kind of bad. I can kind of get off track a little bit.
You got all kinds of stuff going on in that brain.
I'm excited about this. So the first thing, is liquidity. So like the first thing is liquidity. So like it allows you to build up equity. Cause I know even for myself, it's like, I constantly want to buy more properties, but you get to the point where it can get trickier and trickier. And then you don't also, you want to have more control of your money, right? Where this allows you to basically build up money. You build this money, you don't have to worry about it going down. Like it pays a dividend every year. So even if the market goes down, it still goes up.
And that's an important thing. Sorry, I'm just jumping in, but having control of your money is so important.
Yes.
Especially in this environment that we're in today.
Yeah.
With the way that they are devaluing the currency.
Yeah, especially if you want to buy more property, right? Because for real estate, it's great because you're building up cash, you're sheltering it from tax, you're creating liquidity. So even if the market goes down, that's the best time, right? Because let's say you had your money in traditional investments and all of a sudden we have a correction. Like I think we're so due for a big correction, personally. Could be wrong. But let's say we do have a correction and all of a sudden everything drops like 20, 30%. Well, if all your money is sitting in stocks and everything else, and all of a sudden that's down 30%, you're not going to want to sell that, right? You're not going to sell some of those shares or cash out some money. But now if you have something like this where you're building up insurance, your money's not down. So while everyone else is down, now the opportunities come up. You can pull the cash out. And the advantage with the insurance is we can actually do lending against the policies. And you're like, why the heck would you do that? The reason is by lending it, we can actually leave all the money inside the plan. It still collects interest on every dollar, which is insane. And then we create a separate loan. And then by loaning the money, you don't pay taxes. You're tapping up.
That is the beautiful thing about it. Just right there. If anybody is listening to that, go back and rewind it and listen to it again. Because essentially what you're saying is you're able to loan the money to yourself. The money stays in the account. It continues to stay invested while you are now leveraging it to then invest in something else.
Yeah.
It's almost like a double dipping.
It's insane. You're making interest on every dollar, even though you're actually having access to that money. Like I always like to use simple analogies, right? Because I like to take things that are complex because I love reading. Like I probably read like 2-3 hours a night just on everything, just constantly trying to learn. But I try to take this and make it as simple as possible. And I kind of use the analogy. It's like, look at real estate. Like I don't care how much money you have. Like, you know what I mean? Like you look at these real estate tycoons, like even like Trump, you think he's going out and buying properties with cash?
Oh,
why would you use someone else's money?
100%.
And leverage.
It's called leverage. It's called OPM.
Exactly. So you can do the exact same thing with that. And then to take it even further, we can actually even do that even further with that. So we have some clients that can take out these policies inside their corporations and we can actually loan back the premium, 90% of the premium. So you could like, because the other point you hit on was the estate part, right? Because you're like, well, this is great. You see, you built this amazing real estate portfolio. Like I want to pass it on to my kids and everything else. But again, we were talking about before is taxation. Well, what do you do about tax? And what happens with that? So say you buy a property for $300,000, right? And then when I pass away, it's worth $1 million. You got to pay tax on the gain, right? So they take the $1 million that you sold it for when you die, because they consider just sold it, right? You disposed of it, minus the price you paid, you got to pay tax on that amount. Well, we see it a lot where let's say you built up 15, 20 properties or more in this portfolio. Amazing. But now what's going to happen when you want to pass it to your kids? Like only your house and your tax-free savings account and your life insurance will go over to the next generation tax-free. Everything else is taxable. So we've seen it where all of a sudden you get in this position where now you have to sell like 3-4 of these properties just to pay the tax. So the other ones transition. So what we do is we use the same concepts. We're putting money in insurance. You're building up liquidity. It gives you the ability to buy more properties and create more down deposit. You don't have to go to the bank every time and beg for a loan. And then on top of that, when you're no longer here, if you pass away, that money then pays out tax-free. And that money then goes to the next generation. And what I do is I just chip away a little bit of my profits every month, my rentals, and I have that pay for it. I don't even pay for it in my own pocket. So my profits, my rental, put the money inside the infinite banking. And then when I pass away, it's going to pay out this huge amount of money that's tax-free. We get the money in 2 weeks because life insurance is just simple. And then my family can pay off all the capital gains, all the properties stay in my family, and all the other money on top of that then goes down tax-free and it's private.
Right, because it's not only estate planning, but it's also retirement planning as well. Right? Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you get to, again, it's when you're dealing with somebody that has a business or like higher net worth, you get to the point where RSPs kind of lose their benefit. Like once you get over a certain tax bracket, it's like there's really not as the benefit's not the same, right? Because then you start pulling that money out and you get taxable. you get taxed on all the income. So what we'll do is once you've kind of exhaust those options, we can actually build up money inside the policy. Same idea. Your benefit is it grows shelter from tax. You don't have to worry about volatility. So you can take some, higher risk if you want on other investments and kind of have this be like your like fixed income part of your portfolio.
Yep.
That's also a good strategy we do. Yeah. And then the beautiful thing about that is that when you want to start drawing an income in retirement, unlike your RSPs and your CPP and your old age security, which are all taxable. And then to boot, if you make too much income, they'll actually start clawing back your old age security, which is a big piss off. You can basically build up all this money. Say you have $1 million in one of these policies, and we can go to these companies, and most of the banks will actually do loans for it because they believe in them so much, just like they do real estate. They're happy to give you a mortgage.
So essentially what you're saying, if I bring that policy into my bank, they will loan me the money almost like 99.9% of the time.
It's most people don't even know that.
It's like it's gold.
There's actually certain banks that's all they do. They specialize in this. It's crazy. So like
they love those policies.
Well, you know why they love them? It's because insurance companies are super conservative. They've been around forever. These policies that we set up, like the one policy we usually deal with, it's been around for 200 years. It's paid a dividend every year. It even paid a dividend throughout the last world wars and 2008.
That's what I was going to say. Like, how safe is this? Yeah.
And then here's what they do. It's really cool. So the bank, if you go for a loan, the bank will put themselves as first on the payout and the life insurance. They're not stupid, right? Mm. So they put themselves first on it so that when something happens to you and you pass away, their loan gets paid off directly to them. They know they're taken care of. And guess what? There's a 100% chance we're going to die.
Right.
Now, you just don't know when. So like the banks love it. It's super safe for them. But the huge benefit is like you can build up, say $1 million in there. You're like, well, I want to start drawing income. I want to supplement my other income. A lot of companies will loan you like 90% of that money. You can pull out $900,000 and you're not paying tax for pulling it out.
Yeah. Listen, I think it's such a great strategy. Obviously, depending on where you are in your life cycle,
yes,
and what you're doing, but you need to sit down with somebody knowledgeable like yourself to be able to work out that game plan, right, for yourself and for your family and for your estate. I want to dive into the last piece of this podcast, which is the mindset piece. Mm-hmm. I know you're big on mindset. Mm-hmm. Who are you listening to? Do you have any coaches right now? And how has that changed your life?
That's a good question. How much time do we have?
Oh, we got time. Did you get a refill on that or what?
Yeah. Super, super, super important. It's kind of interesting. I because we deal with so many business owners, I think a part of the services that we do indirectly and just as a byproduct is kind of like coaching. Like we kind of coach some of our business owner clients. Mm-hmm. And I know I kind of chuckle when I see some, business owners first getting into entrepreneurship. And I kind of joke, it's like, and this isn't to be sensitive to people that suffer with this, but it's like, I kind of joke that, owning a business is kind of like, kind of like being bipolar. Like, it's a mental struggle every single day. You have some days you're like, this is the best thing in the world. I couldn't imagine doing something else. And then other days you're like, screw this. I'm done. Why the hell am I doing this? Right? Because
it's so true. You know what? I literally went to bed last night and like, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I putting all this pressure? I can literally stop.
Yeah, we're crazy.
And then I wake up, I'm like, I love it.
Yeah.
I love this.
You know who said it? It's Tony Robbins. I'm reading no, it's not Tony Robbins. Sorry. It's I'm going to butcher it right now. It's Tony Robbins or someone else. And it's basically, Grant Cardone. He has a book called Be Obsessed or Be Average. And I'm like, that is so true. Mm-hmm. Because I even have people that have told me throughout my life that I'm like kind of crazy about things sometimes because I get so into it. But I'm like, in a business, you kind of have to be. Like, you need to find that product that you're so emotionally passionate about. And then you can achieve anything. Like, I truly believe that anyone can do anything. You just have to be obsessed enough that you don't want to stop. But back to mindset, it's not just something you just wake up with. Like, it's work. It's no different than a marriage. Like, you need to work on that every day because like, I'll do things like motivational videos, taking different courses, constantly reading, trying to better myself and constantly trying to have reflection. Even journaling is really good. I something I want to do. I keep saying I'm going to do it, but I keep pushing it off. But now I think the biggest thing that's had an impact on my business is coaching.
Yeah. Coaching is so huge.
And
there was some. I'm going to go back to the coaching piece of it, but I went up to the Fast Start class that Chris and Quentin do. This is kind of like how we bring like new investors into what we're doing. And so we kind of changed it up a little bit. And I happen to be there. I haven't been there in a while. And they're like, hey, Gary, why don't you come up and do the closing? I'm like, I haven't done the closing in like 5 years. so I go up there and I'm going through the slides. I don't even know what slide's coming up next, but I'm just kind of just free flowing through it.
Yeah.
And the one of the first pictures is there's an old guy in the bed and his daughter or granddaughter is beside him. And the picture really represents that nobody, when they get to that age, ever regrets what they did. They usually regret what they don't do.
Yeah.
And I think this is where you're going with the obsession piece and like putting everything on the table and trying things and being okay with failing and making mistakes and tripping up. And that's one of the reasons why I love doing this podcast, because this has been such an incredible experience of just being able to express ideas, sit down, at a table across from somebody who I respect or look up to share their story as well too. And that's what you're doing here is sharing your story, sharing your ideas, and you're not perfect. Mm-hmm. Nobody's perfect in this journey, and you make a shitload of mistakes.
I'm very good at making mistakes.
Yeah, so am I.
I'm just stubborn.
Would you say that you've become more successful with more mistakes you make?
Oh yeah, the better you get at putting your ego aside and just learning that it's just constant chaos, and you have to just shrug it off. It's just mental toughness constantly. So like I'm paying this coach right now, and this guy is insane. Like he was actually trained through Bob Proctor, who was then trained through I'm gonna kibosh his name. I'm on baby brain right now, no sleep because of kids. But his one thing he said, he's like, don't wish life was easier, be better.
Or wish you were better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's like,
I think also Jim Rohn said that as well too. Now I don't know who the originator is. Don't wish it was easier, wish you were better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, like with coaching, it's weird because I remember that I actually hired my first coach. When did I think that was probably like 6 years ago. And I remember when I hired him, I paid him like $7,000, and it scared the shit out of me. Yeah. Like I remember even like I was nervous to talk to my wife about it. I remember approaching her, and she's probably like thinking like,
would you do it again?
Oh, so I'll get to that. So I did the 7,000, and I was like, this is crazy. I don't know what I'm doing. And sure enough, I made all my money back plus profit, and I gained a lot of insight from it. So then he offered another course, the same guy, and I did another course for him. And this time it was like 14,000. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, this is insane. Like, I don't know, like I'm nervous, pit to my stomach. And again, sure enough, it paid off. And now I'm doing this mastermind where it's more of like an intimate setting. He basically picked like 4 people out of our group. There's like 500 people in our group, and we meet one-on-one every single week. And I'm paying this like ridiculous amount of money. My wife thinks I'm insane. Probably am, but it's insane. I've almost never put money into coaching and not made money back. Like it's to the point where like you do your research, right? You check out all the particulars and see if it's the right fit for you, and you check out their credentials and everything else. But I mean, I always go into it scared, and I always come out like, damn, I know. I wish I did that sooner.
Coaching is so important. I remember I almost didn't do it, and the reason was because I talked to a friend, and like, why would you spend $1,000 a month to do coaching? And I was like, yeah, I know. Why would I? I can just Google it. I can go on YouTube. And I'm telling you, and so thankfully I did. Mm-hmm. And to this day, I still pay. Yeah. We pay over $1,000 a month on coaching. And I'm telling you, it's the best thing because it allows me to grow. It allows me to ask silly questions. It allows me to bounce ideas off of somebody who is where I want to be or has done things that I'm trying to do. It's so important to do it. And I implore anybody who's thinking about getting coaching, listen, I get it. I know it's expensive, mm-hmm. but it's the best thing you can do.
It's too expensive not to.
Yes. You know, there's another saying. You think it's expensive to hire a professional? Wait till you hire a non-professional.
Yeah. Or a cleanup crew.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Like why try and figure this shit out on your own? Mm-hmm. Right. What would you say is your superpower?
I don't think and I'm stealing this from Will Smith because he's my idol. I don't think I'm particularly good at anything. I'm ruthless with my execution. And I believe that. Like, I honestly believe that anyone can do anything. Like, it all comes down to mindset. Like, if you don't stop, you will figure out a way to solve the problem. You just have to keep pushing.
I love that. I'm ruthless in my execution. I never heard that one before. That's brilliant.
You just don't stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I've always been that way.
You're like a pit bull.
Oh, I'm weird. Like, and everything. Like, I even like writing. Like, I hated writing growing up in school. I hated it. Mm-hmm. English was my worst course. I always dreaded it. And I remember the opportunity came up, and I was with a couple other business owners, and they were talking about writing this book, and I was like, yeah, that sounds terrible. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
That's so wild because I hated writing too.
I hate it.
And I forced myself to write a book, and I forced myself to blog every week. I hated writing. and Dar used to hate editing my writing. Yeah. She used to edit all my writing. She was like, I don't know what the hell you're drinking at like 11 o'clock at night, but Jesus, this is brutal.
Oh, and I don't know what it is. Like, I'm comfortable. I love talking to people. I love people. I feed off that. I love this. I love engaging, learning about their stories. When it comes to writing, it's like my daughter stepped in and just, actually, it's better than probably what I would do.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What's the best and worst day of your life? We'll start off with, let's start off with the worst.
The worst was definitely all the stuff with my mom. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been really hard, and but again, it goes back. I just always try to see the positive. It goes back to everything happens for a reason. This instance, it was really hard. It took me a long time to figure out what that positive was or what that reason was. But I think it brought me to a point where, like, I got to a really bad, like, down point. Like, I was really struggling, like, super, super close with my mom, and because of that, though, it pushed me to rebuild even harder. So when I came back out of that funk and I hired this coach, I even, like, this is like my first drink in 3 months. So I even challenged myself and stopped drinking for 3 months to do all this stuff. And now I feel like I'm on this path to greatly improve my life, even better than I was before, by taking something bad and making a positive out of it. So, like, that was definitely my worst. My best was definitely when my daughter was born. I remember just bawling my eyes out.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. It blows me away too. Even like, I remember like bringing her home and looking at her. I'm like, she's like this like little burrito. Yeah. And now it's like this little toddler running around telling me no.
Yeah. you know what the incredible thing with life and death is that, you know, I'm sure you see pieces and bits of your mother in your daughter.
Oh,
like, so even though she's gone, she still lives on. Mm-hmm. You know, it's an incredible thing.
Well, I feel like, honestly, like, I honestly feel like she's looking out for me, because like I was in that spot and I was really struggling. And it's not like me. Like I said, like, I'm normally like super motivated, like just constant grind all the time. Mm-hmm. And it derailed me, and it took me a long time to get back to myself. And I remember, all of a sudden, when I got that call, I had a weird feeling, and I got that call, and that was when Bob and I started having that discussion about us starting our own firm. I remember looking up and chuckling. I'm like, Mom, you knew, right? Like, she just knew. Like, I was always that person. I would need like a goal or something to like work on, and that's what like reinvigorated me to like step out of that like funk that I was in, right?
Yeah. Johnathan, I've enjoyed this conversation. It's been fun. I've gotten to learn a little bit more about you every single time we sit down and have a conversation. And I'm glad that you were able to share your story with my listeners, because I think you have a very intriguing story. You've done a lot. I love your personality. I love what you've built, and you're a good family man. And I enjoyed having a scotch with you.
Thank you.
And I apologize for being the one to break your 3 months fasting of alcohol, but of course it had to be me to do it.
Yeah, it is May 2-4 weekend.
That's true. We are coming up with it. So, any last piece of advice, words of wisdom that you can share?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that I wish I knew earlier was, stop trying to do it all yourself. Like, I know I was really bad with that because I'm so stubborn, a little bit of a control freak, and that's an understatement. Stop trying to do it yourself. And the people that really build great things, they realize that early on, and they surround themselves with people that are doing what they want to do. People that are better than you, people who are smarter than you, Put your ego aside, surround yourself with them, entrench yourself in them. Try to find ways that you can help them. Try to find ways that you can soak up as much knowledge as you can. That will catapult your life completely. And like, it's hard too, because I remember even when I went through that transition, you kind of cut out certain like friend groups and stuff like that. But once I changed my mentality and started to surround myself with successful people like yourself and other mentors and stuff that I have, your life changes because you come entrenched in that, and your mentality and your outlook on life and even different little nuances change. Your perspective changes, and that changes everything.
Yeah. And that's a great point, because I think also too, what you're saying is that, yeah, you change the people that you spend most of your time with, but then when you come back to your friends, that you've grown up with, the type of conversations you're going to have over here.
Yeah.
But then how they're going to, your coaches are going to push you over here.
For sure.
Right. And I think that's a great way to kind of explain that.
And there's a place for everything, right? Like
100%.
I have the bonds I have in my friendship are like hugely invaluable, and that's my release on weekends, and we help each other, and like that's a big part of life is love and relationships.
Yeah.
But the business relationships is a whole different thing, and that will catapult your life in general. Huge.
Yeah. 100%. And that's why I do those mini retirements. Those mini retirements, bring all my friends back in. Let's party. Let's do this. Let's go to CDs. let's talk about dumb shit.
Yeah, it's amazing.
They're like, okay, I got to go back to work now.
I know. I'm actually trying to steal your idea, because my coach that I have right now, he actually moved. He was in San Diego. He sold shop, moved to Cabo, and he has this like massive villa in Cabo, and he's been like on me. So we're actually going to move to, just for a month, we're going to live in Cabo in January.
Oh, that's awesome,
just
brother.
To do it. Just try something different.
Beautiful. Listen, enjoy when you go down there. I'll probably be down in Mexico at that time as well too. If people want to get a hold of you, learn more about what you're doing, infinite banking, learn more about house hacking, whatever it is, or they just want to hang out with you, how can they do that?
Yeah. So thank you. You can check out our website. So it's thompsonpollock.com, ThompsonPollock.com. You can give us a call, 289-769-8288, or you can email me, planning@Johnathan Pollock, JohnathanPollock.ca.
Awesome. Brother, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your knowledge. All right, man.
Thanks,
take it easy.
Thanks for listening to today's show with Gary Hibbert. Please don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and connect with your host on Instagram @Gary Hibbert. Until next time, stay mindful, and remember, you don't have to be great to start. Just start, and you'll be on the path to being great.